I think one of those areas that plays the biggest part in our spiritual walk, in our spiritual growth. Another way to think about it is your spiritual formation, the way that God is forming you and developing you. There's a lot of different intangibles, long-suffering, charity, humility, but the one that I think is the most critical is sincerity. Because really, that's just what you believe. That's just how you follow Jesus with a real heart, with an open heart, following Him. And begin to think about, how does this work its way in? Why is this so important? And how does this play a significant role in spiritual formations? Well, I think Gerald Settler says this way, and he wrote Water from a Deep Well. And he had, I think, a spiritual life that was similar to mine and similar to a lot of people that I know, where he kind of grew up in church and he went to church, but he didn't really have that real relationship. It wasn't a sincere relationship with Jesus. And it wasn't until his 20s that he began to really think deeply, and then he fell in love with Jesus and he was radically transformed. And he describes it this way, and he says, I know too many evangelicals whose conversion is marked the end rather than the beginning of their spiritual pilgrimage, whose grasp on the truth goes no deeper than knowledge or a handful of Bible verses and self-help formulas, whose commitment to Christ requires little more than occasional attendance at church. And man, does that hit hard for a lot of people if we're just being objective looking at their life. And the next thing to really think about that I'm pondering on is, why is ministry leader? Why might they want to incorporate some of these elements, especially we're talking about sincerity? Why incorporate this into the overall process of forming people spiritually? Well, I think there's some of those important qualities. When you think about it, the most important qualities are intangible. This is hard to measure, but it's something that is so critical and so important. Jonathan Edwards said in a sermon this way: there may be great performance and great suffering without sincerity. I mean, you might be playing a part, you might be acting a certain way, but you're not really following Jesus. And Hebrews chapter 10 verse 22 says, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart. Meaning that's a prerequisite. That's the way that you draw closer to Jesus Christ, is with a sincere heart. So I think just closing it up, how do you incorporate that? Because that's the key part, is how do you use this in terms of application within your church, within your ministry context? It's different. It's difficult. I mean, that's just plain and simple. It is difficult. But I think the Bible provides us with some information, some ways to look at this. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 8 through 10, it says, in the same way, deacons are worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep and uphold deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. And this is the important part. This is what you can implement. And it says they must first be tested. And then if there's nothing against them, then they can serve as deacons. So the biblical guide that we have here is that there's got to be a test. There's got to be some way of measuring and testing. And we hear testing, and sometimes we think about a standardized test or something that formulaic. It's not going to be that. It just simply isn't. But the way I like to look at it and how I train people and lead people is through series of opportunities that they could fail at. It's designed that they succeed. I want to set them up for success. But there's opportunities that they can fail, and they have some responsibility to drop or to fall off on. And it's from those that you can build on. So I hope that's been helpful in how we can gain this critical element of spiritual formation with sincerity.